Many people like to say things like so and so technology came out of nowhere, to render a very mysterious atmosphere. But I have to remind you of a fact. New technology is often not mysterious. Many popular products and services in the world actually use technology from half a century ago. For example, if you have listened to my lectures on 5G, you will know that the most critical coding technology in 5 communication, low density parity check code LDPC, was proposed in the 1960s and was even considered useless before the 1990s. But later 5 was used. The same is true of the language model technology that chat relies on, which is more than 50 years old today. In other words, the underlying technology of chat is 50 years old. Today in the media, many people who have not developed the corresponding technology, and even many graduate students who have learned a little technology will say that technology has developed for so many years. Shouldn't it have exceeded the limit at that time? In fact, whether in industry or in the information industry, technology can indeed be changed, but the principles and limits of physics and information theory cannot be changed. Although the language models used by artificial intelligence today are technically very different from 50 years ago, their principles are the same. In this regard, we will explain the underlying technology of chat, that is, the language model. What is a language model? What is a language model? As the name suggests, it is to build a mathematical model of human language. The most important keyword here is mathematics. A language model is not a logical framework, not a biological feedback system, but a model constructed from mathematical formulas. So why use mathematical models to solve language-related problems? Because this is a shortcut. If we want to make a computer understand natural language, let the computer answer questions, or translate between several languages, the first reaction will be to make the computer understand human language. Let it learn grammar. But people have tried many times and failed, or at least not yet. On the other hand, if you find a way to turn these problems into mathematical problems, and then through calculation, you can indirectly solve these natural language processing problems. So, the idea of language models was proposed. The first person to propose the concept of language models was Dr. Jelinek, whom we mentioned earlier. In 1972, he officially left Cornell University and was in charge of various projects related to language processing at IBM. At that time, IBM monopolized the computer market around the world. And it could be said that in the IT field at that time, it was a lonely fight for failure. So, Jelinek challenged himself to do something that traditional computers couldn't do, especially things related to artificial intelligence. So, Jelinek chose the topic of automatic speech recognition for the research department, which is to let computers recognize what people say. Why is this topic? Automatic speech recognition has been studied since 1946. This history is almost as long as the history of electronic computers. But after more than 20 years of research, it still fails to get the point. At that time, computers could only recognize more than 100 words, and the error rate was as high as 30%. Of course, such a technology had no use value. At that time, as mentioned earlier, people mainly started to study this problem from phonetics and linguistics. The difference between Jelinek and the previous researchers is that he is not a phonetician or a linguist, but a communication expert with a very good mathematical foundation, and was the author of a textbook on information theory at a U.S. university at the time. Therefore, Jelinek's ideas are not limited from before, and he views natural language processing problems from a unique perspective, seeing them all as a communication problem. What is the relationship between natural language and communication problems? According to the modern communication principle established by Shannon, the so-called communication, also known as channel encoding and decoding, is nothing more than the information source first generates an original message, and then restores a message closest to the original message at the receiver. For example, If you transmit a sentence, China is an ancient country, it needs to be encoded before transmission, such as 010101111000. However, there must be noise and signal loss during transmission, and the code received by the receiver may be 1,010,111,000. This will not translate back to the original sentence. So, what should we do? We can list sentences that are similar to the received code. For example, China an ancient country. China is an ancient country. Country is an ancient country. China is an ancient country. Wait a minute. Then, the communication system calculates which possibility has the greatest probability and selects it. As long as the transmission is not too noisy and the information transmitted is redundant, we can all recover the original information. At the time of Jelinek's research, there were already many communication algorithms to do this, which I have covered in the book The Beauty of Mathematics. It's the same way to look at automatic speech recognition from this perspective. When people talk to people, I say the words China is an ancient country, and what is transmitted in the air or on the phone line is the waveform of the sound, and what is heard in the receiver is actually the sound with noise, and he needs to receive the waveform of the sound to restore what the speaker is saying. As long as the noise is not too loud, people can do this. Of course, in order for the computer to do this, it is not to let the computer learn how to understand language, but to let the computer calculate which possible sentence has the greatest probability. This mathematical model that calculates the probability of each sentence in natural language is a language model. For example, in the example just mentioned, the probability of China is an ancient country is 0.05. The probability of China is an ancient country is 0.2, and the probability of several other candidate sentences is 0.01. So, we think that the highest probability China is an ancient country is the sentence spoken by the speaker. How to eliminate uncertainty? Of course, people who love to use their brains will immediately point out, what if I want to talk about those small probability things? Wouldn't you be wrong to predict with the greatest probability? This observation is sharp, and it's really a problem with language models. And the solution to this problem is to use more contextual information and remove all uncertainty. Next section preview.